It was one of those mornings when even the wind felt heavy. Snow fell in thick, silent sheets, covering everything in white. Most people stayed indoors. But Clint Eastwood, a man who'd seen more winters than most, was out driving through the countryside. He liked quiet mornings like this. No noise, no cameras, no attention. Just the sound of tires crunching against frozen ground. But that peace didn't last long. As his truck rolled past a cluster of trees, something caught his eye. At first, it looked like a pile of branches moving slightly in the snow. Then it moved again, weakly. Clint slowed down. His instincts told him something wasn't right. He pulled over, stepped into the freezing wind, and walked toward the movement. And then he saw it, a small brown dog, tied to a tree with a rough old rope. Her fur was covered in frost. She was trembling, eyes filled with exhaustion. Beside her, half buried in snow, were tiny shapes. Clint knelt down, and his heart sank. 5 small puppies, barely moving, their tiny bodies pressed against their mother, trying to stay warm. The mother gave a weak bark, not out of aggression, but fear and pain. It was clear she hadn't eaten in days. Clint didn't waste a second. He pulled off his heavy coat and wrapped it around the puppies. "Hang in there, little ones," he muttered, his voice low and steady. The mother dog tried to stand, but her legs gave out. Clint gently untied the rope from the tree, lifting her into his arms. The cold bit through his shirt, but he didn't care. He hurried back to his truck, placing the mother and her pups on the seat beside him. He turned the heater up full blast, rubbing their fur to bring warmth back into their small bodies. Snow swirled outside, but inside that truck, hope had just been born. The heater blasted inside the truck, fogging the windows. Clint rubbed his hands together, then placed them over the smallest puppy. It was barely breathing. He gently rubbed its chest with his palms, whispering softly, "Come on, little one. Don't give up now." The puppy twitched, then another, soon. Weak sounds filled the truck, the sound of tiny lives fighting to stay alive. The mother dog lifted her head slowly, her eyes meeting Clint's. There was no anger there. Only exhaustion, only trust. He smiled slightly. "You're safe now, girl. I've got you." Snow kept falling harder outside. The road was almost disappearing beneath the white blanket. Clint knew he didn't have much time. They needed warmth. Food and care, fast. He reached into the back seat, pulled out an old wool blanket, and wrapped the dogs tighter. His breath fogged up the glass as he drove carefully through the storm. Every few seconds, he glanced over, checking if they were still breathing. The smallest puppy wasn't moving again. Clint's heart pounded. He parked on the side of the road, picked up the tiny body in his big hands, and held it close to his chest. "Not today," he whispered. "You're not leaving today." Minutes passed. Then, a faint squeak. Clint exhaled deeply, part relief, part disbelief. Even the toughest man in Hollywood felt tears build up behind his eyes. As he drove, memories flashed. All the years of filming in rough weather. All the stories he'd told about strength and grit. But this moment was different. This wasn't about acting. This was about heart. He reached the edge of town, heading straight toward his ranch. The gate creaked open, the truck rolled in, tires crunching through snow. Inside the barn, a warm light glowed. Clint always kept it ready, stocked with firewood, blankets, and supplies. He carried the mother dog inside first. Laying her on a pile of hay, she whimpered softly, curling up as if afraid it might all vanish. Then he returned for the puppies one by one, placing them beside her. The warmth of the barn began to spread through their tiny bodies. Clint filled a bowl with warm milk and set it beside the mother. She hesitated, then started drinking, slowly at first, then faster. The sound made Clint smile. "You're a fighter," he said quietly. "Just like me." He sat on a wooden stool, watching them breathe. Each rise and fall of their tiny chests felt like a small miracle. He didn't move for a long time. The wind outside howled through the cracks, but inside the barn, there was peace. The fire crackled, The puppies whimpered softly, their little paws twitching as they dreamed. The mother dog's eyes stayed fixed on Clint, following his every move. Hours passed. Clint brewed himself some coffee and poured a little warm milk into a spoon for the puppies. He used an old dropper to help the weakest one drink. It took patience, slow and steady, but eventually it swallowed. He leaned back, shaking his head gently. "People think heroes wear capes," he murmured. "Sometimes they just carry blankets." The sound of his old clock echoed in the barn. It was past midnight. Still, Clint didn't leave. He pulled another blanket over his shoulders and stayed with them, watching the fire dance. He'd seen fame, money, awards. But this right here, saving 6 lives, felt different. It felt right. As the snow outside began to fade, Clint pulled out his phone and texted a friend who worked at a nearby animal shelter. He sent just 3 words. "Need your help." Then he looked into the camera for a short video he'd post later. Not for attention, but to raise awareness, he said softly. "If you ever see an animal in pain, stop. You might be the only hope they have." He paused for a moment, looking at the tiny family huddled together. Kindness doesn't need applause. It just needs action. Then he looked straight into the lens with that calm, steady gaze people knew him for. "Have you ever seen something like this where you live? Tell me what country or city you're watching from. I want to see how far compassion can reach." He turned off the phone, leaned back, and smiled at the mother dog, now resting peacefully beside her puppies. For the first time in a long while, Clint Eastwood didn't feel like a movie hero. The night deepened, and the storm outside showed no mercy. Winds howled like wild. Wolves across the empty fields, snow, whipped against the truck's windshield as Clint stepped out of the barn once more. Had only one thought. The dogs needed a vet. Warmth had helped, but their bodies were still fragile, their breathing uneven. Waiting could mean losing one of them before morning. He lifted the smallest puppy into a box lined with towels and blankets. Then, gently, he carried the rest, the mother dog watching him with pleading eyes. "Too weak to stand. Don't worry, girl," Clint whispered. "I'll bring them back safe." He placed them all carefully in the front seat beside him, turned the key, and the engine rumbled to life. The headlights cut through the storm like swords of light. But the road was invisible, covered in thick snow. No tire tracks, no signs of life. Most people would have turned back, but Clint wasn't most people. The truck crawled forward, tires spinning against ice. He leaned closer to the wheel, his breath fogging the glass, eyes focused and steady. Every few minutes he'd reach over, checking the puppies, making sure they were still breathing. The smallest one lay still again. Clint's chest tightened. He stopped the truck, took off his gloves, and scooped the tiny body into his bare hands. The cold burned his skin, but he didn't care. "Hey," he whispered, voice breaking slightly. "You've come too far to quit on me now." He rubbed the puppy's chest, breathed warm air into its tiny mouth, and kept whispering. Minutes passed. Nothing. Then, a faint twitch. A small cry. Clint let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. He smiled, that same quiet, humble smile the world knew him for. "Attaboy," he said softly. "That's the spirit." The snow grew heavier. Visibility dropped to almost zero. The wipers squeaked back and forth, fighting a losing battle. Still, Clint pressed on. He thought about how strange life was. A man who had played heroes on screen, now driving through a storm to save real lives no one might ever know about. No cameras. No applause. Just instinct and heart. He turned the truck toward the main road. A flickering light appeared ahead. The local animal clinic. He exhaled, whispering, "Almost there." But before he could reach it, the truck's tires hit a patch of ice. It slid sideways, spinning slightly before stopping in a snowbank. The engine stalled. Clint's hands gripped the steering wheel. He looked at the dogs, all huddled together. Shivering but alive. "All right," he muttered. "We're not quitting now." He tried the ignition again, once, twice. Nothing. The wind roared louder outside. He knew he had two choices: wait it out and risk losing them, or walk. Clint zipped up his coat, tucked the smallest puppy inside his jacket for warmth, and opened the door. The cold slammed into him like a wall. He grabbed the box with the rest of the puppies, wrapped the mother in a blanket, and stepped into the storm. Each step was a battle. The snow reached his knees, but he kept going, slow, steady, determined. The clinic was only a few hundred feet away, yet it felt like miles. He could feel the mother dog's weak heartbeat through the blanket. "Hang on," he said, voice trembling slightly. "We're almost there." Finally, a faint glow through the snow, the clinic door. He kicked it gently, calling out, "Anyone here?" "I need help!" A young vet assistant rushed out, eyes widening as she saw him. "Mr. Eastwood?" She gasped. "Oh my God, what happened?" "No time," he said quickly. "They're freezing." She called the vet, and together they brought the dogs inside. The warmth of the clinic hit them instantly. The vet moved fast, checking temperatures, wrapping towels, preparing warm fluids. Clint stood there, covered in snow, hands red and raw. He didn't care. He just watched, silent, as life slowly returned to the little family. One by one, the puppies began to move. The mother opened her eyes, weak, but alive. Clint finally allowed himself to breathe. The vet turned to him. "You saved them," she said softly. "If you hadn't found them tonight, they wouldn't have made it." Clint nodded, his voice calm but full of emotion. "I didn't save them," he said quietly. "They saved me from walking away." The room went silent. The snowstorm raged on outside, but inside there was warmth, peace, and a quiet kind of victory. Engagement line for narration pause. If you were driving through that storm, would you have stopped or kept going? Be honest. Tell me in the comments below. The clinic was quiet now, except for the faint hum of heaters and the soft breathing of the animals. The storm outside had slowed, but the cold still pressed against the windows, desperate to get in. Inside, Clint Eastwood stood by the metal table, sleeves rolled up, eyes locked on the little family he'd just saved from the snow. The vet, a woman in her 30s, calm and focused, worked quickly, checking the puppies one by one. 2 of them were stable, 2 were weak, and 1 wasn't breathing properly. Clint watched, his jaw tight. He'd seen life and death many times, on screen and off, but seeing it this close, this raw, felt different. The vet glanced at him. "They were out there for a long time," she said softly. "Their body temperatures are dangerously low. We'll do everything we can." Clint nodded silently. He didn't speak. He just stepped closer, placing a hand gently over the mother dog's head. Her eyes opened weakly. Her tail barely moved. She looked at him as if she understood. "You did good," he whispered. "You held on for them." The vet wrapped warm towels around the smallest puppy, then placed it under a heating lamp. Clint stayed beside it, rubbing its paws gently between his fingers. "Come on, fighter," he said softly. "You've got a whole life waiting for you." Hours passed. The clock on the wall ticked louder with every minute. Clint didn't sit. He didn't rest. He helped however he could, fetching warm water, holding blankets, keeping them close to his chest for body heat. The vet noticed. "You don't have to stay, Mr. Eastwood," she said kindly. "We'll take it from here." Clint shook his head. "I started this," he said quietly. "I'm not leaving till they're safe." There was something unshakable in his tone. That same grit that had made him a legend on screen. But here, there was no camera. No audience. Just heart. Midnight came and went. The snow had stopped, but the night was still heavy with silence. The vet sighed, looking at her monitor, the smallest one. She paused. "He's fading again." Clint stepped forward immediately. "Tell me what to do." She hesitated, then handed him a towel. "Hold him close. He needs body warmth. It's the only thing left we can give." Clint took the fragile puppy into his hands. It was barely the size of his palm. He pressed it gently against his chest, beneath his jacket, right over his heart. "Hey," he whispered, voice trembling now. You're tougher than you look. I know that feeling. He sat down in the corner, the fire of determination burning quietly behind his calm face. For almost an hour he sat still, whispering, rubbing, waiting. And then, a sound. A faint whimper. Clint's eyes widened. The puppy had moved. He exhaled, shaking his head with a small smile. There you go, he said softly. Told you not to quit on me. The vet came over, checked the puppy, and smiled. He's coming back, she said, relieved. You did it, Clint just nodded, still staring at the tiny creature in his hands. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. His silence said everything. The mother dog lifted her head slightly and gave a soft bark. As if thanking him, she crawled forward weakly, licking his hand. Clint looked at her, his eyes gentle. You've got nothing to thank me for, he said. You did the hard part. You kept believing. The vet handed him a towel. You have a good heart, Mr. Eastwood. Not many would have stopped that night. He smiled faintly. Maybe not, he said. But what kind of world would it be if we all kept driving? The room went quiet. Outside, the storm had finally stopped. The first light of dawn began to peek through the windows. Soft, pale and full of promise. Inside the clinic, the cold was replaced by warmth, not just from heaters, but from something deeper. The puppies were alive. Their mother, the weak, was recovering. Clint stood there, watching them breathe, a quiet sense of peace settling over him. For the first time in years, he felt something he couldn't quite explain. Not pride, not relief, but something purer. Hope. He turned to the vet, nodding once more. Let's keep them here a few days, he said. I'll cover everything, she smiled. Of course. They're in good hands now. Clint looked back one last time at the small family he'd found buried in the snow. Their fur glistened under the warm light. Eyes half open, finally safe. He whispered under his breath, Welcome to your new life, little ones. Then he stepped outside into the cold morning air. The storm had ended, and so had their suffering. He just felt human morning sunlight broke gently through the clouds, turning the snow outside into a field of diamonds. Inside the small animal clinic, the once frozen family was now wrapped in soft blankets, surrounded by warmth, care, and peace. Clint Eastwood stood quietly in the doorway. He hadn't slept a minute. But for the first time since the night began, he smiled, not as an actor, not as a legend, but simply as a man who'd done something right. The mother dog stirred, blinking slowly as the sunlight touched her face. Her breathing was steady now, calm. She looked stronger, though still fragile. Still healing, the puppies lay close to her. All 5 of them huddled together in a soft towel nest, each little chest rising and falling, tiny tails twitching in sleep. They were alive. Clint stepped closer, kneeling beside them. He reached out a hand, letting the mother sniff it. She looked up at him, eyes full of gratitude, a quiet bond forming between 2 survivors. You made it, he said softly. All of you did. The vet entered, smiling when she saw him still there. They pulled through, she said gently. You saved them, Clint shook his head. I just gave them a chance. They did the rest, she chuckled. You'd be surprised how few people even stop to give that chance. He didn't reply, just stared at the small family, his face calm, eyes deep with thought. After a long pause, he asked, Does she have a name? The vet smiled. Not yet. You found her. You should name her. Clint looked at the dog for a while. She was resting, surrounded by her pups, fragile but brave, a living symbol of survival. Grace, he finally said. Her name's Grace, the vet nodded. That's perfect. Hours passed. Clint helped feed the puppies, tiny drops of milk in a bottle, one at a time. They squeaked softly, fighting to drink, full of life again. He couldn't help but laugh quietly. Tough little rascals. Grace watched him closely the whole time. Whenever he moved too far, her eyes followed, as if afraid he might disappear. When he knelt beside her again, She reached out weakly with a paw, touching his hand. He froze for a moment, then gently patted her head. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe now. No one's gonna hurt you again. The vet came over with some good news. They're stable enough to go home in a couple of days," she said. "But they'll need care, warmth, rest, and food." Clint didn't even hesitate. "They'll come with me," he said. "I've got plenty of space, and I think they've earned it." The vet smiled. "I had a feeling you'd say that." For the rest of the day, Clint stayed by their side. He helped the staff clean up the cages, prepared a small box for their ride home, and made sure every puppy was warm. By evening, he finally sat down on a chair. Exhaustion catching up to him, Grace crawled a little closer, resting her head on his boot. That small gesture said everything. It wasn't just gratitude. It was trust. Clint looked down, his rough hands brushing through her fur. "You're tougher than most folks I know," he said softly. "You didn't just survive, and you fought." He leaned back, staring out the window. Snow still covered the ground outside, but the storm had left. The world felt new again, quiet, still, and full of meaning. For a man who had spent decades telling stories of strength, honor, and courage, this felt like the truest one of all. Not scripted. Not filmed, just lived. He thought about how easily he could have driven past that tree, how simple it would have been to tell himself, "Someone else will stop," but he didn't. And because of that, 6 lives were breathing, growing, living. Clint let out a small laugh under his breath. "Guess the old cowboy's still got a few good rides left," he murmured. The vet walked by, hearing him. "You've done something beautiful, Clint," he shrugged modestly. "Just did what anyone should do." But deep down, he knew not everyone would have. As night returned, Clint stood by the door of the recovery room, watching Grace and her pups one last time before leaving. The mother lifted her head, looking right at him. Her eyes glowed in the dim light, strong, thankful, alive. Clint smiled, whispering, "Rest easy. Grace, tomorrow's going to be a better day." He turned off the light, stepped outside into the cold, and looked up at the sky. The stars had finally come out. And for the first time in a long while, Clint Eastwood felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. 2 days later, the snow had melted enough for sunlight to kiss the hills again. The storm was gone, replaced by a quiet calm, the kind that comes only after something good survives the worst. Clint Eastwood pulled his truck up to the small clinic once more. The windows glowed warmly, and the sound of life echoed inside. When he walked through the door, every head turned. The vet smiled wide. "You're right on time, Mr. Eastwood." Clint looked around. The puppies were awake now, tiny tails wagging, curious eyes blinking at the world for the first time. Their mother, Grace, sat proudly nearby, stronger, healthier, almost unrecognizable from the fragile soul he had found tied to that tree. Clint knelt down beside them, chuckling softly. "Well, look at you, little fighters," he said. "Didn't think you'd make it, huh?" One of the puppies clumsily stumbled toward him. Chewing on his bootlace, he picked it up gently. Holding it close, the little creature licked his chin, making him laugh. A rare, honest laugh that came straight from the heart. The vet handed him a folder. "All the papers are ready. They're yours now, if you still want to take them home." Clint didn't even glance at the documents. He just nodded. "Of course I do." He carefully lifted Grace and the puppies into a big basket lined with warm blankets. As he carried them out, someone from the clinic staff quietly took a photo. Clint in his worn jacket, carrying 6 rescued souls against a background of melting snow. It was a simple picture, but it told a powerful story. By the next morning, that photo was everywhere. Social media exploded. Clint Eastwood saves dog family from freezing to death. Headlines flooded news sites and feeds. People around the world shared it, calling it a real hero's act. Comments poured in by the thousands. Some wrote, "We need more people like him." Others said, "This made me cry." What a man. The story touched hearts from Los Angeles to London, from Manila to Madrid. When reporters reached out for comment, Clint kept his answer short, simple, and sincere. He said, "I didn't do anything special." Anyone with a heart would have stopped. We all have the power to choose compassion. Some just forget to use it. That one line, humble, honest, and pure, went viral again. Clips of his old movie moments began circulating beside his new quote, with fans calling him the real-life hero Hollywood never wrote. Grace and her puppies became little celebrities of their own. The Vet's Clinic received donations from across the country to help rescue more stray animals in the winter. 1.